Today, we're going to be looking at an esport unlike any other. It's a game set in the Mega Man universe that was originally made to be a fun, collect-em-all single-player experience. It's a game that was released for the Game Boy Advanced. It's a game that more than 20 years after its original release has a competitive scene that spans the globe and is still growing. The game we're talking about is Mega Man Battle Network, which was Capcom's attempt to compete with games like Pokemon, but that ended up becoming a melting pot of game genres that makes it wholly unique in the world of video games. This is Mega Man Battle Network. Mega Man Battle Network was developed by Capcom and was originally intended to be a horror game, one where the player would have a heartbeat monitor hooked up to their body and plugged into their Game Boy, which would affect what happened in the game itself. However, during the development process, card games started to become really popular, and Capcom wanted to break into that market. With one of their strongest IPs being Rockman, the Japanese name for Mega Man, it was a no-brainer that a collect-em-all type game should be centered around their perennial franchise. Departing from the 2D platforming that defined Mega Man, this game was created with a new mentality. In an interview with Rockman Corner, one of the programmers who worked on the game, Koetsu Matsuda, said that the team's philosophy was to, quote, make a game where a kid who's not great at the action can rely on strategy instead and still win. So, battles were more about being smart and tactical rather than just having good reactions and hand-eye coordination. In 2001, Capcom released rockman.exe, the game's Japanese title. To the rest of the world, 2001 was the year they first got to play Mega Man Battle Network. The first thing we have to address is what Battle Network is exactly.
So it's a fighting game where you're using cards, but also it's actually boxing. In between the real-time sections, you have turns where you have to go back and start choosing your hand.
Okay, so imagine chess, but it's a video game, and a card game, and an RPG.
Okay, let's break all that down a little bit. First, the game is played on a grid, hence being similar to chess. The core game is built around collecting chips, which can be anything from abilities to stat boosters to new attacks for your character. Basically, chips are cards and have to be grinded out and unlocked before they can be used. In this way, Battle Network is an RPG. Chips go into a folder which acts like a deck, so it's also like a card game. But battles aren't turn-based, it's real-time. There's frame data, mind games, and a substantial amount of requisite game knowledge. This real-time combat is why it's like a fighting game. But unlike fighting games, rounds aren't continuous. Instead, they're organized into 15 segments, during which chips are chosen at random from your folder, and a set number can be selected for the upcoming round. After 15 seconds of battling, everything stops, the player can select new chips, and the next round begins. For this reason, the game is like boxing. Basically, it's unlike any game you've ever played, and 20 years on, it still has a committed and growing competitive scene. Battle Network's history can be segmented into 3 distinct eras. The first is the Gamepax Era. For those of you who have been around for a while, you probably know what Gamepax is. For those who don't, it was a forum used by anyone and everyone to discuss pretty much every game imaginable. Strategies, theory crafting, lore. Gamefax was the place to talk about your favorite games with like-minded people. So it's unsurprising that the Battle Network community found something of a home on Gamefax. While most of the discourse was about the single-player mode, there were some who theorized about builds that might be competitively viable. Guides would come out, cases would be made for why X build would work very well in a PvP setting, and most people took these guides as gospel. Unfortunately, being a Game Boy Advanced game, it was very, very difficult to test out these theories, as tournaments for GBA games were few and far between. As online play became more prevalent, it quickly became apparent that these theorized best builds did not hold up when it came time to actually play.
Because you had to play face-to-face with the link cable, there wasn't actually that much playtesting going on. Once it actually could be played online, there was 2 problems. One, there was lag. That was obviously unplayable for people and changed the games. But the second bit was that a lot of the theories just didn't hold up at all because it was kind of created without any playtesting. It actually discouraged a lot of the fans from continuing to play the game because they just assumed that the theory crafting on the Gamefax guides wasn't actually correct, that the game must be unbalanced.
Because real-world results didn't exactly match up with the Gamefax theory crafters, people started saying that the game was unbalanced and competitively unviable. Due to this mindset, many players simply stayed away from PvP altogether, and the game's competitive scene never really took off. Well, that and the fact that getting the game running online was an absolute nightmare. On top of the difficulties of finding people and getting a VPN up and running, the actual emulator that everyone was using, VBA Link 1.8, was not exactly the most legitimate. It was a program that someone made for a college project back in 2004 and hadn't really been updated since. Thankfully, the program was made to be open source and readily available to the community. But unfortunately, the emulator is so old that most of the source files have been lost to time, meaning that getting in and tinkering with the emulator is pretty much impossible. So, what do you do when you hit a roadblock like this? Build your own road, of course. Much like the Super Smash Bros. Melee community and Slippy, diehard fans of Battle Network have taken it upon themselves to create their own build of the game, complete with rollback netcode and online matchmaking. But more on that later. Right now, we're still in the late 2000s, stuck using the only emulator that was compatible with the GBA Wi-Fi adapter. All of these reasons contribute to this being known as the Dark Ages, when there was no centralized place for BN players to congregate, no easy way to find other BN competitors, and no real community to speak of. To find someone to play against, you had to look really deep and basically pray that someone, somewhere, would have a server up and running.
It was actually crazy. Like, you would just find stray YouTube comments being like, hey, if someone still plays this game, like, here's my server and here's my password. When I found out you could play the game online, I was like so excited, and when I found the first human being to play with, the game ran at 2%. They were using like a save file that they got off of the internet, and it was hacked to have 9999 HP. It was running at 2% the entire time, and I played that thing out, and I was just like, this is the best thing ever.
Not much happened during this era. In 2009, Battle Network 6 was the last game in the series to be released, and while it was hailed as the most balanced and competitive of the entire franchise, most people focused on the single-player experience. Especially since, to play competitively, you'd have to unlock your own chips on your own game, before even attempting to play against other people. This meant that the competitive barrier for entry was grinding hours upon hours of single-player to even start building a folder. So, years went by, and there was very little in the way of a North American competitive scene. But then, in 2015, a player named megaman.exe announced on Reddit that he was hosting an online tournament with prizes. Seasoned competitors, fans of Battle Network, and fans of Mega Man in general leapt at the opportunity to get their hands on some otherwise unattainable Mega Man swag. Pretty quickly, the event had more than 60 people signed up, which is pretty good for a title that otherwise had no community surrounding it. Unfortunately, when tournament day rolled around, some of the problems that made BN so difficult to play became readily apparent. Setting up the emulator, especially for new players, was a nightmare. Games would often lag, desync, or be utterly unplayable, and a number of matches during the tournament had to be decided pretty much through a coin toss. On top of this, many players dropped out after seeing how competitive the community could be. Many who signed up initially were just casual fans who thought that the event would be just for fun. But there were many who had been in the community for years and were ready to try their hardest. At the end of the day, of the 60 who signed up, only 37 players ended up competing, which is, honestly, pretty good. And this tournament, as rough around the edges as it was, gave way to something much bigger than anyone could have ever expected. N1GP.
The N1GP originally was a Skype group that we used to kind of corral everybody. It was a really weird time in the community. We were just very much getting our sea legs from both a broadcast or a standpoint, a rules standpoint.
megaman.exe was not finished after just one tournament. Carrying forward the momentum from this last event, N1GP was founded and has since become a mecca for Battle Network players. Whether you're looking for people to play against, want to talk strategy, or you're just getting into the game for the first time, N1GP has pretty much everything you could ever need.
We have extensive guides, tons of information, data on individual chips, certain interactions, you name it. Like we basically have an encyclopedia of content, and it's all thanks to the community. And that's really what the N1GP is about.
However, as we've already talked about, the online experience leaves a lot to be desired. So, one player took it upon himself to completely rebuild one Battle Network game and turn it not just into a serviceable online experience, but a really, really good one. Mars is a part of the N1GP R&D team and has been working on completely redoing Battle Network 3 to include rollback netcode and automatic matchmaking. If you watched our video on Slippy for Super Smash Bros. Melee, or any of our videos on Power Rangers or Guilty Gear, you'll know just how important it is to have rollback netcode. Mars's current goal is to make a build of the game that is stable and readily available to anyone, and then apply the same principles to Battle Network 6, the most popular title in the series. Hopes are that in a couple of months, public matchmaking for BN6 will be a reality, and hosting online tournaments with rollback netcode would make hosting tournaments even more viable. The prospect of good, clean online play is especially important when you take into consideration how international this scene really is.
So, our top players, we have people in California, we have people in Canada on the opposite side, we have people in New York, we have people in Central America, we have people in Brazil, we have some players coming in from the Japanese scene, which is really cool to see. It would be great to do a meetup and, have a battle of the Titans one day, but we're not there yet. It's a bit expensive to get to that point.
Being originally a Japanese title, there's quite a large Japanese community that, for years, existed with little to no connection to the North American scene. This is where Aqua, a Japanese player, is instrumental in bridging the two communities together. After their first tournament, N1GP hosted an event with a Japanese rule set, and Aqua came and beat all of North America's best players.
Yeah, Aqua, he somehow caught us on Twitch during one of our early tournaments, and he was so excited that there was an international scene, and he joined the next tournament and he got first place. Yeah, so the tournament he won, we actually were really excited that the Japanese community found us, and we organized our first mod card tournament. That's the Japanese exclusive format. It was kind of his home turf, but it was a great learning experience for us as well.
Since then, the two communities have become much more tight-knit, and BN events have taken on a variety of new rule sets. The biggest change has been the shift away from closed sets and the adoption of open sets. Closed set formats are tournaments where, going into a match, you don't know what chips your opponent is holding. This makes it viable to sometimes run folders that aren't considered meta, as you can take your opponent by surprise. However, closed sets also lead to some unsportsmanlike conduct in the community. In tournaments, players would be allowed to bring 2 folders, and could, if they wanted to, hard counter one specific person to take them out of the event. Unfortunately for this player, there would be no way to prepare against it, as they would have no idea what chips their opponent is playing with. Closed sets also led to players scouting out other players before their matches to gain a competitive edge come game time. All of these underhanded dealings led to a rise in the popularity of open sets, a format in which players on both sides know, prior to each round, exactly what their opponent is holding.
All of our setups are visible to each other. It's not double-blind matches. So we go into it knowing the other player's strategy, or at least we know what their strategy might look like. And so you go in fighting Nerith, and you're like, oh, this clown doesn't even have an anti-damage, this is gonna be easy. And then you're dead.
This means that winning is less about preparation and scouting, and more about folder building and actually being good at the game. With more people coming into the community, competition has also been on the rise. New players have been coming out of the woodwork, like Zero Guy, who showed up out of nowhere and started winning everything. All of this growth and intermingling between communities culminated in early 2021, as Capcom and the community were gearing up to celebrate Battle Network's 20th anniversary.
The 20th Battle Network anniversary, that's for the entire series, and that's something that Capcom tends to celebrate for their franchises. We had something planned, just a big tournament. We also had the Capcom accounts tweeting it out on Twitter, and that really helped with the outreach. Yeah, so it was a 3-week event. The combination of the awesome all-star casting crew we had on top of just the really cool matches that were being played. But yeah, that event was really successful, and I'm quite happy with it.
The event was a celebration of everything Battle Network, and the main event was a tournament featuring some of the best players in the world. The eventual victor of the event was a player named Symes, who was using a folder that was completely off meta and somehow found success with it. The fact that a player can come into an event using a folder that, by all accounts, simply shouldn't work is a testament to how deep and intricate Battle Network really is. The game's meta is being pushed further and further every day and shows no signs of slowing down or stagnating. Not bad for a title released more than a decade ago. The Mega Man Battle Network scene has survived over the years due to a global community of unbelievably dedicated players. They've gone through good times, survived hardships, and flourished in the unlikeliest of circumstances. 20 years on, and this Game Boy Advance game has found a new life in N1GP and all of the communities around the world who are still playing after all this time.
So that's really it. Like, if there is something to highlight, it's the community. Because the community has grown, and it has, you know you have something good when the community grows legs and people are passionate about it and join up and want to learn more about it. It's the best thing ever.
Before we end this video, I'd like to give a huge thanks to Megamaster-X, Salad, Mars, and Soulcross for sitting down and talking about their wonderful community. Their social media links are in the description below, as well as a link to the N1GP Discord. If you, or anyone you know, would be interested in joining the Battle Network community, they would love to have you, and have an encyclopedia of resources ready for any beginner who wants to take the plunge into the Battle Network competitive scene. This video is made possible thanks to our wonderful patrons. Massive thank you to everyone on this list, and shout out to Jason, Brendan, Foxy, Iron, Lyra, Mauve, Nate, Nathan, Oshayo, Sierra, Shampoo, Weebu, Spartacus, and Yashichi for being platinum supporters. And an extra special shout out to Steven, Noodles, Marco, and Mookie for being diamond supporters. If you also want to support our channel and unlock perks, check out the Patreon link in the description below or join our Discord server. If you want to help us out in a different way, leaving a like, subscribing, and hitting the bell to stay up to date is also appreciated. My name is Jonah, thanks for watching.